Okay, everybody, I guess we'll get started here. So I'm Dr. Adrienne Malik of University of Kansas Medical Center. This is my colleague Elspeth Pierce, who is also from University of Kansas Medical Center. And then this is Dr. Robert Ehrman of DMC Wayne State University out of Detroit. We are a little shorthanded today. We were also supposed to have Dr. Schoenfeld, but unfortunately she had a time zone change issue and is flying out much earlier than she anticipated. So what this leaves us with opportunity-wise is a little bit more time for questions at the end of this. Dr. Ehrman's going to kind of cover some of the topics she was going to cover, so hopefully you should still get the comprehensive effect of this. So what we're going to talk to you about today is peer review and why we got into it, why we like it, and why you should too, and kind of what you can grow this into in your career and what you can do with it that can be beneficial to you. So for me, getting into peer review is this very nebulous process. Trying to figure out how you can get involved in this feels a little bit like floating out in space. You don't really know who to talk to. You don't really know what pathway to go down. And it just seems like it's this secret society of people who show up in the middle of the night and invite you to do this, right? Like, how do you get involved? So one day when I was a fellow, I got this random email inviting me to be a reviewer for a journal. And taking the advice of one of my previous mentors, I accepted it. And then submitted what is probably the worst peer review that has ever been submitted in the history of the planet. But through this experience, I realized, like, hey, you don't have to be this super important, smart, well-respected person, as evidenced by me getting invited to do one of these things. And so then I decided that I wanted to learn a little bit more about it, do a much better job, redeem myself from this really, really bad review. So I am also here to tell you, how do they select peer reviewers? Turns out there is no uniform selection process. It's very journal-based and editor-based. So some editors will only offer peer reviews to people who are experts in their field. They will only offer peer review to people who have published heavily on a topic previously, or only to reviewers that they know in the past turn their things in on time and give good comprehensive reviews. Also, there are some journals that will just put on their website, hey, please come review for us, upload your CV here. And then there are some other journals that will only invite reviewers that have been suggested by the authors who are submitting their paper. So lots of different ways to do this and get involved. So for those of you who've never done this before, this is just a quick little list that gives you some ideas of where you can go and how you can sort of get involved with this. So one of the first and most easy things to do is you can send out your CV to journal editors or to the journals themselves. Just kind of express interest, and then they'll see on your CV what you're involved in, and then extrapolate to that what you might be good at reviewing. Additionally, when you go to submit a manuscript for a paper that you've written, oftentimes there'll be a little box somewhere in the submission process that says, would you be interested in reviewing for us in the future? Go ahead and click that little box. Don't feel intimidated. They will reach out to you if you do this and invite you to review in the future. You can also ask other researchers or reviewers that you know to suggest you, because sometimes they will be invited to review something and they just don't have time, or they don't think it's in their wheelhouse, or for whatever reason they just can't take care of it at that point in time. And then what they will do is they will respond back to the editor with suggestions of people who should take their place. So if you've talked to your colleagues and say that you want to be one of those suggested people who takes their place, this is another way how you can get involved in peer reviewing. You're also going to want to establish and maintain an ORCID or a Publons account. These are sort of scientific academic accounts that track what you do, both in the manuscripts that you write and also the reviews that you take care of. So over time, as you do more of these, you start to lose track of how many you've done, and these sites will keep track of that for you, and then it makes you searchable by other journals and editors when they're, out of names and out of ideas and they're just looking for somebody to review something. They will go over to these sites and look for people who have a history of reviewing. Other places that you can go are national events like this one, where you can hopefully run into some people who are journal editors, and they will be at your talk and see that this is an area that you possess some expertise, or you can just buy them a drink at the bar, beg them to invite you to be a reviewer, and then sure enough, a week later it pops into your inbox. Lastly, if you're very junior or you're just very uncomfortable with getting started with this on your own, you can participate in a group peer review, which is where a more senior reviewer will review a manuscript with you in parallel, kind of walk you through it, and then you will submit your review recommendations together. So it's kind of like a vetting process. If you've never done this before, the person who reviews with you kind of puts their stamp of approval on you as a reviewer, and thus kind of vouches for you to the journal. And that's a good way to get cleared to do this. So more important than how to do this is kind of the why that we do this. And so now the three of us are going to kind of tell you our story of why we do this and what we get out of it, because you will see it's very different for all three of us. So for me, I'm still very junior. I'm an early career peer reviewer. I am an assistant professor at University of Kansas Medical Center, and I've only been doing this for about 3 years. And so the reason that I got involved into this was, one, accepting something that I had no business accepting because I didn't know what I was doing. And then from there, what it has allowed me to do is the more I peer review, the better I get at writing my own manuscripts, because I do a little bit of research on my own. And this has allowed me to have a much better idea of what my reviewers are looking for when they review my manuscripts. It gives me a much better idea of the process of what's going to happen with my paper, and then generally just kind of what journals are looking for, because each journal will kind of have its own flavor that you get a better sense of if you peer review. So this is why I do it. I am by no means an expert, and it was not that difficult for me to get involved in it, and I feel like it has done a lot to grow me early in my career and afford me better opportunities. And so through this, the most recent opportunity that I've been given is I got a small section editorship for a small medical journal. And so now I'm going to get the experience from the other side of this, which is learning to be an editor and figuring out how to better peer review what's coming into my section. And that's just my experience. So I will let my colleague, Dr. Pierce, talk about hers.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Elspeth Pierce. I'm also at the University of Kansas. I'm also early career, and so I've started reviewing probably about 2 years ago, mainly for WestGem, and I've been the gold standard reviewer for a couple of years, and specifically with their special issue in education research. And I got into it by doing a group review. So one of my colleagues there was a couple of us that were interested in medical education, interested in potentially publishing in the future. And he was like, okay, this is a good way to kind of, get your hands wet, figure out what's going on. And so we did a couple group reviews, and then I just kind of contacted the editors. I was like, here's my CV. I've done a couple of these, and so I would like to, kind of continue to review with you guys. And so they brought me on as one of their reviewers. And so I mainly focus on the medical education special issue, but I'll do some others here and there. The commitment, for those of you who are already like overextended with everything that you're doing, is actually not that heavy. For the special issue, I'll get a lot in a couple of months to review, but for the rest of the year, it's kind of quiet. So you'll get maybe 1 to 2 offers a month. Sometimes in the 2 months before when they're doing the reviews for the special issue, it's like I got like 5 or 6 per month. But you can always say no if you're way too busy and overextended. You can always say no. But I try to pick up if it's a light offering, I'll pick up like one every time they offer. So I think it hasn't been super taxing or anything to do for one journal. I also published in GEM, and so they contact me every once in a while. I'm not a reviewer for them, but they'll contact me with things to review every once in a while. So that's kind of how I got into it. I would say one of the big things was starting in an area of comfort. So I get a lot of requests for reviews that are way outside of my comfort zone, and I do not feel bad at all about saying no. It's like that wouldn't be a fair to the author that submitted it for me to review their stuff. So if it's something way out of my wheelhouse, I'll say no. But if it is something that I feel comfortable, I have some knowledge and background in it. I don't have to be the most published or the most knowledgeable or it's a peer review. And so I know what I want to read out of a journal. I know what I'm interested in. I know when I'm opening up this journal what the quality is supposed to be. And so I feel like as a reviewer I can bring that to the table. And so that's kind of gotten me over that imposter syndrome of, because I don't publish that often. Dr. Malik downplayed the amount of research she does. She publishes a lot, and so, so I really don't publish that often, and so the imposter syndrome was really strong with me when I was getting into it. But doing it a few times, it's like I know what I want to read about. I know what the quality should be, and that's really what it takes. And then, if you get into it, if you reach out to colleagues who do this, see if you can group review with them. Some journals do it specifically, have group review kind of as a standard. And then, but if you can't do a group review for some reason, but you still want to get into it, apparently you can ask editors for feedback. So if you do a review, you can ask them to give you a review on your review to improve yourself and get better. So that's another way to, if you're like really brand new and you're worried about that first review, because my first review was also probably pretty cringeworthy, to kind of get that feedback and grow yourself as a reviewer. And also, if you can see the other reviewers' review, if you have somewhere where they'll send you both reviews and say, this is what we gave to the author, that's really helpful because you get to read somebody else's review of the paper and kind of see how they interpreted things and how what feedback they gave, and you can kind of grow yourself as well. So that's been kind of my path in this.
All right. Dr. Schoenfeld was going to talk a little bit about kind of how you can grow and influence the field of emergency medicine through peer review, but unfortunately now we're going to have Dr. Ehrman talk about that instead.
Yeah, it's really disappointing for everybody, I know. So I'm going to cover some of what she was going to talk about, and then I had some other things I was going to talk about. So kind of three brief things. First, if you came here expecting a didactic about how to actually complete a peer review, what to do and not to do, instead of hitting us with a haymaker when we walk out, there's a research learning series podcast about that's available on the SAEM website, so I would direct you there because there's a lot of valuable things there. So the other two things are one, how peer review being a peer reviewer can help you sort of shape the field of medicine, emergency medicine, and then how it can be useful for your career. So I've been doing this a little bit longer than these two. Generally, the way it works is you start sort of getting asked to review anything, and the more reviews you do and the better you are. Sometimes you actually wind up getting more and more reviews and it becomes overwhelming. But as you start to produce higher quality reviews and you publish a little bit more yourself, you'll start to get asked to do reviews that are a little bit more in your topic area. So I do cardiovascular imaging stuff, and so now mainly that's the kind of papers that I review. And so how that helps is when you're reviewing papers that are in a subject matter where you're a content expert, you can sort of help guide reviewers and make their papers better. Because remember, that's like the point of being a peer reviewer is you're an advocate for the author. You're trying to say, hey, this is a great idea. These are some other things I think that you could do to make it even stronger. I mean, everybody jokes about angry reviewer number 2, and there's a lot of snarky comments and this and that. But as you move forward, you become a recognized expert in that field, and then people, the authors, whether some journals are anonymous, some are not, but will respect and take into account what you've said about their papers, the subject matter, and that actually can really start to influence the kind of the direction that your field goes. And so that's like a pretty big part of what you can get out of it, what the community can get out of it as a whole, and then sort of moving on to how being a peer reviewer can sort of benefit your career as you go through this. So like I said, I've been doing this for maybe about 10 years, and over time, again, I review more stuff that's in my subject matter area of expertise, but as you become a better reviewer and you do quality reviews, sometimes you'll get asked to be on editorial boards. So I'm like an ultrasound section editor for one journal, a decision editor for another journal. And so those are also ways that you can, again, they're CV building things as you think about academic promotion. Being a peer reviewer is good, but being on an editorial board is, better. And again, it's not, some of it is about improving your CV, improving your professional reputation. And so it starts as something that seems kind of small and is overwhelming and daunting. Again, I think everybody feels that way. The first review I did was, it was embarrassing if I had to look at it now. And so, it takes time, but with progress, you get into these, more positions of authority where, again, you also have this ability to sort of shape the medical literature. I actually, I got a master's in biostatistics after I had been attending for maybe 5 years. And it sort of started as I was interested in research and I was a reviewer, and I started to, not understand a lot of what was happening. And as I learned more and I read more on my own, I was like, oh, this is interesting to me. I want to, study this more formally. And again, that opens up other opportunities. There were fewer methodologists and biostatistical experts in medicine overall, and in emergency medicine. So again, these are ways that, starting out what seems like something that you're not qualified for can morph into something where it builds confidence, it builds your professional reputation, it builds your CV, and then you're actually sort of shaping the way that EM research goes, especially in the same area that you're an expert in and interested in. So I think we'll kind of, that'll end the formal talk portion, and then we'll answer questions.
Yeah, so as much as this is a very short session, I feel like if you're somebody who's unfamiliar with this process, there are lots of questions. There truly are no stupid questions. So does anybody have anything that they would like one of us up here to answer for you regarding peer review?
How long did you take on your first peer review for both of you, roughly? How much time did it take to get the final?
Like time spent actually writing it, or the time that I spent nervously like shaking in a corner when I had to go submit it because I was nervous somebody was going to figure out how stupid I was?
I have no idea.
Yeah. So you're given usually about like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks to get your review done, and I'll usually set aside like a couple of half days to go over it. It takes longer the first few times, but kind of once you get your rhythm, there's lots of like published rubrics for how to go through in peer review. So looking up one of those is helpful. Just kind of go through. I go through the paper 3 times. And then if there's a lot of references or citations, you probably want to take a little bit longer to kind of double check those, because that'll be a time suck. But honestly, it's not a huge lift to do a review. And once you do a few, you get faster.
And one of the things that can be helpful too, if you've never done it before, if you know anybody who's done one, and they are willing to let you sort of see what they did, because when I did my first review, I had no idea about the format, so like having to mention line numbers according to the manuscript where you're finding your issues, having to provide an overall synopsis. I had no idea about any of these things, and had I just looked at somebody else's example, my first go at this probably would have been less embarrassing. But there are, again, lots of ways that you can sort of get at least a working idea of how to do this if you decide that you want to dive in and try and do one of these. I think Wiley publishes a nice little overview of how to do a quality peer review, and that it will walk you through all the steps, and it has an example at the end of it of a quality peer review. You had a question?
Yeah, hi. My name's Dan Mayer. I'm a decision editor at Western Journal and have been a peer reviewer for 20 years. And I'm so excited that you guys did this, because I don't think I've seen anything about peer review at any of the meetings I've been to in the last 20 years or more. And I think it's about time that we really discuss it and talk about it. Let me start by asking you, do you know the difference between grandparenting and babysitting? Here's the difference. Grandparents are available 24/7. They don't get paid, and they care how the kid turns out. Why do I say this? Peer reviewers. So when you're first asked to do a review, ask yourself, do I have 2 weeks? Do I have enough time in the next 2 weeks to be able to get this done? Is that something I can actually work out? You're not going to get paid. Okay, we all accept this. This is part of our responsibilities as being responsible custodians of science and making sure that medicine moves forward in a reasonably good way. And then the last thing, you want to have good papers in the journals. So papers that are crap shouldn't be there. All right, I'm being a little harsh, because as a decision editor, I have taken it upon myself to a holy crusade. If I get a crappy article, I will do everything in my power to try and shepherd it through so that it is publishable. Doesn't always happen, but at least I'm trying to see if I can get them to express the science better, or to accept that they didn't do such a good job, but to point out where the deficiencies are so that the next person can do better research in that area. And what was the last thing I was going to say? Oh, critical appraisal. How many of you have had an EDM course in medical school? Two? Not very many. That's too bad. I'm sorry. I'm sad to hear that. I taught evidence-based medicine for 22 years, and I'm very passionate about good critical appraisal. If you haven't, well, okay, here's where I'm going to get in trouble. Read my book. It's called Essential Evidence-Based Medicine. It's actually kind of a cool book. I like it. I can say that because I'm rewriting it and doing a third edition now. But it'll give you some ideas of what to look for. Or read the JAMA User's Guide to the Medical Literature. These are all good resources to teach you how to be better critical appraisers. Anyway, I think I'm done. Thank you, guys.
No, thank you.
And sometimes like the best review kind of synopsis is that you recommend that they kind of like rewrite and submit to a different journal, because sometimes sometimes if you know like this would be really great in this other journal, like just kind of like directing them that way. If you're like, this paper really doesn't fit with like the mission of the journal or even the quality, it's like, but you can get this published and I can kind of help you to guide you that direction. That's also something that you can do with peer review.
And with regard to some of the statistical analysis, because I know that's the part that tends to be very intimidating for people. That was also very intimidating for me to start with because, I went into medicine because I was told there would be no math. And so over time, though, what has happened is if I really don't know what's going on with the statistics, before I would give my review and I would note to the editor, hey, I'm not totally sure what's going on here. You're going to want to have somebody else look at this who knows a little bit more about this than I do. But what has ended up happening over time as I do more of these, I actually make it a point to learn whatever the statistical analysis is that they are doing in the paper. And so my understanding of statistics has gotten significantly better as a result of doing this, because I learned something new about statistics with each paper that I review. And it's gotten to the point where now I don't have to look some of this stuff up anymore. I actually know how it works. And I've gotten better at seeing where people lie with numbers. And so over time, you will start to find a lot of these papers don't actually show what they purport to show, and it's all kind of hidden in the statistics. So this is where you get to be like the least exciting, nerdy version of Sherlock Holmes. Yes?
Have you all had an opportunity to get feedback from the journals and editors on your reviews? Because I do some reviewing and I've started to like it, and I think I've done what you said of like, seeing what the other reviews said just to make sure I'm not crazy and seeing what the final decision is. So I'm trying to incorporate those things into my work, but I was wondering whether there's a typical process or what's common to get feedback just to like get that in.
So some editors will just on their own give you a little bit of feedback. I have reached out to a couple of them just to, because again, like my first go at this was traumatic for me. And so I've been trying to make sure that I'm getting better as I am going. And then like I've reviewed some stuff for him before, and he usually does a pretty good job of outlining in his final decision why something is or is not going to be published. And so I can look at that, and then occasionally he'll tell me really good job, or I'll ask how I did and I'll hear crickets and I'll know.
That's not true, Shows. That's a great job. So it's a great question, and I think it varies by journal. Some journals will have like on the back end, the editorial side, there'll be like a rating. You rate a review. Is it 1 through 5? I think WestGem does that. And then they'll also recognize at the end of the year, like outstanding peer reviewers. They have like a metric for it in terms of number of reviews and quality and that sort of thing. Sometimes if there's like a really bad review or a really great review, you'll get direct editorial feedback. Sometimes if you do really great reviews, you get asked to be like on the editorial board. The last quick thing I'll say is that it's always good to look at the reviews. It can be helpful. The editorial decisions, again, depending on the journal, can be highly. I don't know what the right word is, because I don't mean to use it pejoratively, but sometimes editors will have a specific reason they want to accept a paper that it may not be like the greatest paper, but there's something important that they want to be out there. They want to or they want to publish more papers about sepsis or heart failure, because again, again, depending on the journal, the citation metrics are important for the publishers, and so, they may know this may not be the highest quality paper, but it's going to get a lot of citations, which is going to increase our impact factor. And again, not to say that that's bad, because it's, the more prominent or prestigious your journal is, the more bigger articles you get there. So take that with a grain of salt, and just as an indication of, I've reviewed a few things for AEM that I have said reject, and that they have gone on to be the Jeff Klein's editor pick of the month, and so now I'm just like, oh God, I'm just terrible. And so, don't feel bad if you make a recommendation and then the editorial decision is the opposite.
To go on that, most journals, at least most of the ones that we're talking about in emergency medicine, will send you your review and the reviews, all the other reviews, and the letter that the section editor or decision editor sends to the author. So, and I think Adrienne said this earlier, read those. And when you're first starting out, you'll find that you get a lot of good ideas from that, and it'll improve your ability to do that. I don't think the ratings, the 1 through 5 ratings, that peer reviewers don't see those. But if you're doing a good job, like Elspeth, you'll be a gold star, and that's not
Gold standard or whatever, something like that. So we've run out of time. Thank you guys so much for coming. And then if you have any additional questions, we can step out in the hallway and you can come grab one of us.
Yes.
And we will answer any additional questions. Thank you so much.
And then lastly, if you wouldn't mind, this QR code is a survey for our little talk here. This is how we get to potentially get invited back, or very succinctly not invited back. So please fill it out. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
This was helpful.